Reasons why ducks make fantastic pets. Let's go. Ducks are extremely comical and funny to watch and to interact with. They will give you hours and hours and hours of entertainment, and they all have unique and quirky personalities. Most ducks are extremely friendly and very, very easy to tame. Ducks are highly food motivated, so once they recognise you as the provider of food, and if you interact with them whilst you're feeding them, you'll soon have them eating out of the palm of your hand. And I mean that quite literally. They can become incredibly bonded to you and want to follow you wherever you go. However, ornamental ducks such as mandarins and wood ducks are typically a little more flighty than the domesticated breeds. So more of the ornamental ducks are a bit more skittish and scared of humans compared to the domestic ones. One thing I would say about ducks though is that they are quite wary of any sort of change. So they can be wary of new people and new objects. A brief example of this is I left the pink bucket on the side of the path that my ducks use every single day to go down into the paddock. They flat out refuse to go down the path because of this new bucket, and it's quite silly, but they get scared of new things. Another example of this is during the winter time I move my duck house ever so slightly so that it doesn't catch the wind in the winter time, and if I do that, my ducks will refuse to go into the duck house at night simply because I have moved it slightly. It's the same duck house that they've slept in for the last 6 years, but because I've moved it ever so slightly, they will not go in it. It takes them a few days to get used to it being changed before they'll accept the change and be okay with it. So they can be a bit silly in that sense, they can be a bit wary of new things, but once they get used to you and used to an environment, they're absolutely fine. Ducks are actually really hardy and are relatively easy to look after. Basics of what they need are food, water and a safe and secure shelter that is predator proofed. For food you can use things like poultry layers pellets or a grain mix. Plus they can have fruit and veg, and they will also eat all manner of insects. My ducks' personal favourites are tomatoes and strawberries. If you live in the UK though, be careful about what you feed your ducks, as there are a lot of laws regarding keeping poultry in the UK, of which some seem a little bit mad at first glance. For example, you're not allowed to feed your ducks kitchen scraps from your kitchen unless you live in a vegan household. So for example, if you had some lettuce in the fridge that you wanted to cut up and give to your chickens and you wanted to cut it up in the kitchen, then you are now breaking the law. The reason for this law is to reduce the chance of feeding poultry food that has been contaminated with animal products. So if you want to feed your ducks fruit and veg, you can, but you cannot store it or prep it in your kitchen unless you live in a vegan household. Another example of this is freeze-dried mealworm. Now ducks and chickens love these. Again, in the UK, feeding these to your ducks is in fact illegal. Now the reason for this isn't because there's anything particularly bad about mealworm, but it's because of where they come from. The majority of freeze-dried mealworm that is available in the UK actually comes from places like China, and there's no way to guarantee what those mealworms were eating and feeding on before they were killed and freeze-dried. So yeah, because we have no idea what these worms were feeding on before they were freeze-dried, we can't offer them to our ducks because of the chance of contamination in the food. Now, if you are caught breaking these laws, you can actually receive a quite hefty fine, or in some extreme cases, your birds could be culled. So it really is serious, so you really do need to know your laws in your area. Now, if you're in the UK, you can look up the laws on the government website. Just look up DEFRA. Now, I know DEFRA sounds like some James Bond villain's organisation. It's not though. It actually stands for, I think it actually stands for the Department of Environmental, Farming and Rural Affairs, I think. So next, water. Now, you need to be able to provide water for the ducks to obviously drink. You don't need to provide a pond for your ducks, although if you can, please do, because they will much appreciate a pond. Believe me, I know they love a pond, but they don't actually need one as such. So what they do need though is they need a bowl of water that is deep enough for them to be able to submerge their whole head in. Now this is really important because this helps keep their nostrils nice and clean and their eyes clean as well. They also need an area for them to actually have a bath in. So a good option is either a children's sand pit or a children's kiddie pool. They're really good options for that. Next, they need a decent sized area for them to walk around in and perform all their natural behaviours, such as foraging and just generally waddling about. So now that I live in the countryside, I have very few predators during the day, so I can actually let my ducks out in a paddock out the back of my house and they can waddle around there all day, and then I bring them in at night to a secure area. However, if you live in a more urban area like I used to, where you can see foxes all throughout the day and night, obviously you can't leave them out in an unsecured area. An enclosed pen would be best. So something like a large aviary would be a good idea. So something where predators can't get in, and if possible it should have a roof on top of it, some sort of roof, either wire or something, just so that it's completely enclosed so that no foxes can get in and no other predators can get in. At night you need to supply a secure duck house for them. Now it can be a shed or it can be a purpose-built duck hutch or duck house. They don't need to have perching bars because they don't perch, they actually sleep on the ground. So all they need is a nice area for them to sleep in that is secure from predators. You need to regularly clean your ducks out, and the poop is not the nicest, I have to say. It is very soggy and it is very smelly. So if you don't think you can deal with cleaning out duck poop, then a duck is probably not the option for you, and they can be extremely messy. But if you can deal with cleaning out soggy, smelly duck poop every day and cleaning the water every day, then you will love owning ducks as a whole. If you can deal with that part of it, then you will enjoy owning ducks. The hardest thing I would say about keeping ducks in the UK is in fact bird flu. Now during the winter months it has now become a regular occurrence for DEFRA. Remember, the Department of Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs, that's a mouthful. They tend to issue an instruction for all poultry owners, whether you have a huge farm or whether you just have one or two pets. It applies to all poultry owners, that they must have their poultry housed indoors or under cover during the winter months. Some people keep their ducks in stables and sheds, and one year I kept my ducks in sheds and a polytunnel. But the minimum is really to keep your ducks housed in a pen that is netted over. So basically what this is for is this to make sure that your ducks have no contact with wild birds. So generally what I do now is I actually net over my pens, because I find that easier than putting them in sheds. I find that their welfare is better if they're still out in the air, but just not able to go out from under cover, if that makes sense. So yeah, I generally net over my pens in the winter, and they're not allowed out of their pens because it is equivalent to a lockdown. So that's what we talk about when we talk about, that's what we mean when we talk about poultry lockdown, is the fact that you're not allowed to have your ducks and chickens free roaming during this time. And this goes on for months and months and months. Last year, the lockdown began in November and it wasn't lifted until the 1st of May. So this is like nearly half the year that your ducks and chickens will be spent in lockdown, which can be an issue for people that own ducks and chickens and maybe don't have an area to enclose them in. Also, another thing you have to do during this time is you have to up your biosecurity. So what do I mean by biosecurity? I mean that you have to, for example, have antiseptic dips that you can put your feet in when you go in, when you enter your duck pen and when you leave your duck pen. So you have to be constantly sanitizing your feet, your footwear, to make sure that you're not passing any of that bird flu into your ducks area. Also, they like you to change your clothes as well when you enter your duck pen. So you want clothes specifically for when you go in your duck pen, which have to obviously be washed regularly. And there's a whole host of different biosecurity measures they want you to put in place during that winter months. Now, if you're found breaking the lockdown rules, you can face a really hefty fine, and in some circumstances your birds may be culled. Now last year, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of birds were culled in the UK because of bird flu. It's a really serious thing. So just something to consider. If you're thinking about keeping ducks in the UK, that is something you do have to plan for, because it's all about keeping your ducks safe. And it may not seem it at the time, because obviously you're restricting where they can go, what they can do. It can be difficult to keep them mentally engaged and happy whilst they're in a lockdown, but it is for the safety of all birds across the country. So just a little recap of why I think ducks make fantastic pets. They are extremely comical and funny, and they provide hours and hours of entertainment. They are easy birds to tame, and they can become quite trusting of humans quite quickly. And they are really quite easy to look after. If you're willing to clean out the ducks' poop and clean their water, then that is the hardest part about them, is keeping them clean. Apart from that, they are so easy to look after. As long as you're giving them food and water and shelter, they'll be happy as anything. Yes, so ducks make incredible pets. Okay, that's the end of my video for today. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.